Hello, everyone, and welcome to CogNosco Ascolto, the official scientific podcast of CogNosco Lab. This podcast series highlights our research in cognitive science and artificial intelligence.
Hey, fellow word nerds. Welcome back for another deep dive. I think we all kind of take for granted that we have this, mental dictionary in our brains. But have you ever really stopped to think about how it actually works? Like, how does your brain store and access all those words?
Yeah, it really is amazing, isn't it?
Totally. And today we're going to be diving into some cutting-edge research that suggests our mental dictionaries might be even more complex and fascinating than we ever imagined.
I'm excited to dig into this.
Me too. So to help us unpack all of this, we have an expert in cognitive science.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with the basics. For anyone who might be new to this whole world of cognitive science, can you give us a quick rundown of what cognitive networks are and why they're so important for understanding how our brains work with language?
Sure. So cognitive networks are basically like maps of how words are connected in our minds. When you think of one word, it often triggers other related words.
Right, like if I say beach, you might think of ocean, sand, sunscreen, all those words that go together.
Exactly. And those connections, those associations are what make up our cognitive networks. They're how we organize and retrieve information from our mental lexicon, which is like that big mental dictionary we were talking about.
Gotcha. So it's not just a random jumble of words in there. There's actually a structure to it.
Precisely. And understanding that structure, those cognitive networks, is key to understanding how we learn language, how we use language, and even how we think.
So we're not just talking about vocabulary here. We're talking about the very foundation of thought itself.
Yeah, language is such a fundamental part of who we are, how we interact with the world, how we understand ourselves.
I'm already mind blown, and we're just getting started.
Just wait, there's more.
So today's deep dive is focused on a brand new scientific paper from the CogNosco Lab, and it was published in the journal New Ideas in Psychology, which I love the name of that journal. It's like perfect for what we do here.
It really is.
And one thing I always love to point out is when we see international teams of authors coming together to work on this kind of research.
Me too. It's so important to have those diverse perspectives.
Absolutely. And it just speaks to the global nature of science,
For sure, science knows no borders.
Okay, so let's dive into the heart of this paper. What's the big question they're trying to answer?
Well, we've been talking about cognitive networks, and for a long time, scientists have been using something called pairwise networks to model those connections.
Pairwise networks. Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So it's basically the idea that we link words together two at a time, like beach and ocean, or dog and bark, those kinds of word pairs that are strongly associated.
Okay, makes sense. Like a simple web connecting 2 points.
Right. But this paper proposes a pretty radical idea. What if our brains are actually working with something much more sophisticated?
Oh, I knew there had to be a twist.
There is. It's called a cognitive hypergraph.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but also a little lost. What in the world is a cognitive hypergraph? And how is it different from these pairwise networks we've been talking about?
So think about it this way. Pairwise networks are like those simple webs, right? Connecting 2 points at a time.
Yep.
But a hypergraph is more like a multi-layered, interconnected tapestry where each thread can connect a whole cluster of concepts all at once.
Okay, so it's not just connecting 2 words, it's connecting a whole bunch of related words all at the same time.
Exactly. It's a much richer, more nuanced way of representing how our brains actually store and retrieve information.
So instead of just linking beach to ocean, a hypergraph could link beach, ocean, sand waves, sunscreen, all in one go. Kind of like how those words often pop into our heads as a group.
You got it. It's like a mental snapshot, a whole scene, rather than just individual objects.
Okay, this is making more sense now. So how did the researchers actually study these hypergraphs? Are they like peering into people's brains?
Well, not quite. They use something called free associations, which is a really cool technique in cognitive science.
I've heard of that. Tell us more.
Yeah, so basically they asked people to just say whatever words come to mind when they hear a specific word.
So it's like a word association game.
Kind of, but the beauty of it is that those free associations reveal a lot about how words are connected in our mental lexicons.
So like if I say cat, you might say dog or meow or furry, and those associations tell us something about how your brain is organizing those concepts.
Exactly. And the researchers in this study used a massive data set of free associations to build their hypergraph models.
Wow. So they're taking those word associations and using them to map out these complex networks in the brain.
Yep. And then they compared those hypergraph models to the traditional pairwise networks to see which one was better at predicting how people learn words.
Okay, so they're basically asking, can these hypergraphs tell us something about the order in which we acquire language?
Exactly. And the results are pretty mind-blowing.
Ooh, I love mind-blowing results. Spill the tea.
Okay, so they found that these hypergraph models were significantly better at predicting the order in which people learn words compared to those traditional pairwise networks.
Wait, so you're saying this study can actually predict what words a child might learn next just by looking at these clusters of associated words? That's incredible.
It really is, and what's even more amazing is that this predictive power held true across different age groups, toddlers, children, even teenagers.
Wow, so this hypergraph structure, it's not just a fluke. It seems to be fundamental to how our mental dictionaries develop over time.
That's what the research suggests. It's like a blueprint for how we organize language in our brains.
This is seriously fascinating stuff. I'm already thinking about all the potential implications of this for education, for language therapy, for understanding how the mind works in general.
Me too. It's like a whole new frontier of cognitive science is opening up.
Okay, my brain is officially buzzing with excitement.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away, let's take a step back and talk about how they actually tested this. Did they, scan people's brains while they were learning new words?
Well, not in this particular study. This research focused on what we call computational modeling, which is a super powerful tool in cognitive science.
Computational modeling. Okay, I'm intrigued but also a little intimidated by that term. Break it down for us.
Sure. So basically, they used machine learning algorithms to analyze all that free association data and compare how well those hypergraph models versus the pairwise networks did at predicting those word acquisition patterns.
Machine learning, that always sounds so futuristic.
Yeah.
So they're basically feeding the computer all this word data and asking it to predict how people learn.
Pretty much. And what's really cool is that the computer doesn't have any preconceived notions about language development. It's just looking for patterns in the data.
And the results were that those hypergraph models were the clear winner.
Yes, they consistently outperformed the pairwise networks in predicting that order of word acquisition, which is pretty strong evidence that those clustered connections, those hypergraphs, are playing a crucial role in how we learn language.
Wow, this is blowing my mind. I mean, it's one thing to talk about cognitive networks in theory, but to actually see them reflected in the data and how people learn language, that's just next level.
I agree. It really takes our understanding of the mental lexicon to a whole new level.
And the fact that they use machine learning to do this, it just adds to the coolness factor.
Definitely machine learning is becoming such a powerful tool in cognitive science. It's helping us uncover these hidden patterns in the brain that we might never have been able to see before.
So this is really like a marriage of technology and cognitive science coming together to revolutionize how we understand the mind.
I think that's a great way to put it, and this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can explore with these hypergraph models and machine learning.
This is seriously groundbreaking research, but I am curious, what does this all mean for the field of science and cognitive modeling in general? Is this like a paradigm shift? Are we entering a new era of understanding the mind?
I think it has the potential to be a major shift. Remember, the mental lexicon is a purely cognitive system, but it's also deeply interconnected with all sorts of other cognitive functions, like memory reasoning, even consciousness.
Right. Our thoughts are made up of words.
Exactly. So if these hypergraphs can better model how we learn and organize words, well, perhaps they can shed light on those other cognitive processes as well.
So it's not just about language, it's about understanding the very fabric of thought itself.
I think you're onto something there, and that's what makes this research so exciting. It opens up a whole new avenue for exploring the mind.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see the implications of this. If this hypergraph structure is so fundamental to how our brains work, it could revolutionize how we approach everything from education to artificial intelligence.
I think you're right. It has the potential to change how we understand the world, how we learn, how we create.
This is some serious mind-blowing stuff, and I can't wait to unpack even more of it. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break, so stay tuned. We'll be right back with more insights from our expert on this fascinating world of cognitive hypergraphs and what it all means for the future of understanding the mind. All right, we are back and ready to dive even deeper into this mind-boggling world of cognitive hypergraphs.
I'm ready for more mind-blowing.
Me too. So we've been talking about how this research is like a major breakthrough in how we understand the mental lexicon.
Yeah.
But, I'm always a little skeptical when something sounds too good to be true. I mean, no scientific study is perfect, right?
Oh, that's a really good point to bring up. It's important to be critical of any research, no matter how exciting the findings might seem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So are there any limitations to this study that we should be aware of?
Of course, and to their credit, the researchers were very transparent about the limitations of their study.
That's always a good sign. I like when scientists are upfront about the potential weaknesses of their work.
Yeah, it shows that they're really committed to rigorous science and not just trying to hype up their results.
Absolutely. So what were some of the limitations that they pointed out?
Well, one of the main ones was the sheer size of the data set. Analyzing hypergraphs, especially with the kind of complexity they were dealing with in this study, requires a massive amount of computational power.
Oh, so even with today's technology, it's still a challenge to crunch all that data.
It is. They used a huge data set of free associations from this database called the Small World of Words.
Small world of words. I like that name.
It's a great name, but they still had to focus on a subset of words that were relevant to the specific age groups they were studying.
So they couldn't analyze like all 1.2 million responses in the small world of words database.
Not all of them, at least not with the computational resources they had available.
So does it mean like their findings might have been different, that they had access to even more data?
That's definitely a possibility, and it's something the researchers acknowledge themselves. They suggest that future studies could benefit from even larger data sets and more advanced computational tools to really capture the full complexity of the mental lexicon.
Yeah, it's like we need bigger supercomputers to map out these super complex hypergraphs.
Exactly. And who knows what kind of insights we might gain with even more data it's exciting to think about.
Okay, so data set size is one limitation.
Yeah.
What else did they point out?
Another important one was the source of their data. Remember, they were using free associations to build those hypergraph models.
Right.
But the free associations they used were primarily collected from adults.
Uh-huh. And they were using this data to model how children learn language.
Right. And, kids and adults probably have pretty different mental dictionary.
Yeah, for sure. A toddler's understanding of the word dog is probably a lot different from mine.
Exactly. Children's understanding of words and those associated networks, they evolve as they grow. So using adult data to model child language acquisition might not perfectly capture those nuances.
Yeah, it's like trying to use a roadmap of a city that's still under construction. You get the general layout, but some streets might be missing and new ones are popping up all the time.
That's a great analogy. The researchers actually suggest that collecting free association data directly from children would be incredibly valuable for creating more accurate models of child language development.
Oh, I bet. But that sounds like a pretty big challenge, trying to get kids to sit still and do word association tasks.
I can imagine, but it would be worth it to get that kind of data. It would really help us understand how those little brains are building those complex hypergraphs.
So we've got the data set size and the adult versus child data.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other major limitations we should be aware of?
I think those are the two biggest ones. There are always going to be smaller limitations in any study, but what I really appreciate about this paper is that the researchers were so upfront about those limitations. They even suggest specific ways that future research could address those limitations.
Yeah, it's like they're not just dropping a bombshell research paper and walking away. They're actively inviting the scientific community to build upon their work.
Exactly. And that's how science should be. It's a collaborative process. We're all in this together, trying to understand the world, and in this case, the human mind.
Well said. So despite these limitations, it sounds like this research is still a major step forward in our understanding of cognitive hypergraphs and how they might shape the way we learn and use language.
I think so. It's definitely paving the way for a whole new era of cognitive science, and I, for one, am incredibly excited to see where it leads us.
Me too. And speaking of where it leads us, I'm curious about the bigger picture implications of this research. We've been talking about language, but is this just about words? Or could it have broader implications for how we understand the mind as a whole?
That's a great question, and one that I think a lot of researchers are grappling with right now.
Okay, so we've explored these strengths of this hypergraph research. We've acknowledged some limitations. But now I'm really curious about the bigger picture. What does this discovery about cognitive hypergraphs mean for the future of cognitive science? Like, could this really revolutionize how we understand the mind?
Yeah, I think it really has that potential. We've been talking a lot about how this research kind of challenges that traditional model of the mental lexicon, but I think the implications, they go way beyond just language. This could change how we approach studying all sorts of cognitive processes.
Wait, so you're saying this isn't just about words? It could impact how we understand memory, problem solving, maybe even consciousness.
Exactly. Think about it. Like almost everything our brains do involves making connections between concepts, ideas, experiences. And up until now, we've been kind of limited to these fairly simplistic models for representing those connections. But, hypergraphs, they allow us to capture a much richer, multidimensional picture of how our minds actually work.
Yeah, I'm starting to see what you mean. It's like we've been trying to understand this complex machine by looking at each individual part in isolation, but now we have a way to actually see how all those parts are interconnected and working together.
That's a great analogy. And not only can we visualize these complex networks, but we can also analyze them mathematically. Network science provides all these powerful tools for understanding how information flows through a system. And by applying those tools to hypergraphs, we can gain these really deep insights into those cognitive processes.
So we could use these network metrics, like you mentioned, degree and closest centrality, to actually study things like memory retrieval or decision making.
Exactly. Imagine being able to track the pathways of activation in the brain as someone's solving a problem, or the clusters of concepts that are triggered when someone's experiencing a particular emotion. Hypergraphs, they could provide this framework for mapping these really intricate mental landscapes.
Okay, my mind is officially blown, but let's be realistic here. We're still in the early stages of this research, right? It's going to take time to develop these tools and apply them to all these different areas of cognitive science.
Of course, but that's what makes this field so exciting. We're on the cusp of this new era of understanding the mind, and the possibilities are really endless.
And I imagine machine learning is going to play a huge role in all of this, right? We'll need these super powerful algorithms to analyze these complex data sets and uncover those hidden patterns within them.
Absolutely. Machine learning can help us make sense of these vast amounts of data that are being generated from brain imaging studies, behavioral experiments, even online platforms. And by combining those data sources with these hypergraph models, we can start to build these truly comprehensive models of the mind.
So it sounds like we're entering a really exciting time for cognitive science. And it's like we're these explorers setting sail for this new continent with a whole new set of tools and maps to guide us.
That's a great way to put it. And just like those early explorers, we're bound to make some incredible discoveries along the way.
And who knows, maybe those discoveries will lead to breakthroughs in everything from education to artificial intelligence. It's mind-boggling to think about the potential impact of this research.
It really is. But for now, I think the most important thing is to keep asking questions, keep pushing the boundaries of our knowledge, and keep exploring, the incredible complexity of the human mind.
Well said. And for all of you listening out there, here's a final thought to ponder as you continue your own deep dives into the world of knowledge. If our minds are truly organized as these hypergraphs, these intricate tapestries of interconnected concepts, what does it tell us about the nature of thought itself? Is it more like a symphony than a linear narrative, more like this multi-dimensional web than a chain of isolated links? We don't have all the answers yet, but that's what makes this journey so fascinating. So keep those brains buzzing, folks. Until next time, happy deep diving.